Misinformation and historical revisionism. These have been the big buzzwords in the Philippines since the start of our election period until now. Historians and teachers alike have been fearful of the spreading of this due to its adverse effects. Sadly, misinformation and historical revisionism have been rampant in the Philippines. But why is it that these respected members in education, like teachers and historians, have been ignored for so long? Well, that's because they lost to an unlikely foe. TikTokers, YouTubers, and other celebrities in the Philippines. You know, in hindsight, it sounds really weird saying that out loud, but this is a genuine problem. People would rather listen to the opinions of an influencer rather than a scholar about facts and our own history. But you know what? I can't fully blame them for that because it's not a new phenomenon, or at least in psychology. Today, I want to talk about historical revisionism and misinformation, why influencers are so good at spreading them, and why we have to be careful with our perception of history. Welcome to Psypop. In this series, we'll be tackling how pop culture, or something within pop culture, has displayed a phenomenon where we can learn from it in the context of psychology and or mental health. If you like the series and don't want to miss out on future episodes, don't forget to show us support by liking and subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to click on the bell icon to get a notification whenever we post a new video. Now, to actually define what historical revisionism and misinformation is, because these are buzzwords, but the thing with buzzwords is that a lot of people don't actually define them when they keep using them. They just expect everyone to know what it is. But I want people to actually learn from this video. So, first, historical revisionism is the act of rewriting historical records to either erase, sanitize, or change certain events to be more favorable to a certain party. Now, this goes hand in hand with misinformation, which is wrong or otherwise misleading information that is presented as if it were a genuine fact. You could rightly say that historical revisionism is a subset of misinformation. Now, one of the easiest ways to verify information is to check multiple sources of information that's available regarding that one topic. Get as many perspectives as you can as possible. A historical event or incident reported on the news always has more than one source looking at it at a time. If it's the news, try looking at various news outlets rather than just relying on one, and compare the information reported by all outlets and see what they're all saying that's similar compared to different. If it's a historical event, it's still much the same. Look at various sources, be they word of mouth, historical texts, and textbooks, and so on, so forth. See what's similar and connect the dots. Another valuable method of identifying real from fake information is checking and contextualizing the source of where that information came from. Does the source in question have a vested interest in the information? Some kind of connection to it? What's the background of said source of information? One source may have certain ideological or political leanings that influence them to report it in a certain way, whether that be more appealing or more in the wrong or at fault. Now, reliability is a funny word in the world of information. I, along with my fellow writers, am inclined to believe that technically no source is truly reliable in giving an honest truth of an event. After all, even the attempts at the most objective, honest, and complete delivery of information are subject to unintentional innate biases of the source, which can manifest itself from something as small as a source only being able to deliver that source's own perspective and not 100% accurate reconstruction. The important thing is to fact check. Try to gather as many differing perspectives as you can, verify if there's concrete evidence, and think for yourself as to the plausibility of any given information. So, now with knowing how misinformation works, let's now talk about celebrities, influencers, and how they can end up spreading misinformation in the first place. Influencers, in order for them to do this, influencers, celebrities, anyone of higher status, what they have to do first is to create trust. Influencers, in particular, for example, provide insight into their personal lives, or rather the parts of their lives that they're willing to share to the public anyway. Through their content and online interactions, they're able to build rapport and build and create a community online together. Their online personalities hold the power to influence their many followers, and to many people, they represent someone they can idolize and look up to. And if their influencer status is not handled responsibly, however, this gives them the opportunity to spread misinformation, whether they intend to or not. Another phenomenon that falls under this category is influencer marketing. The act of selling products through influencer endorsements is common practice now in the age of social media. However, this way of selling and influencing can go even beyond products and can be applied to information and beliefs. Whatever ideas they endorse can easily affect the line of thinking of the general public. So it's vital that this trust that they have with their followers is used for good. Now, as I said, it's best to look at both sides objectively, and before I talk about the bad with how influencers really add into the conversation of misinformation and all of this historical revisionism talk, I also want to talk about how the influencer phenomena can actually be done to improve our lives and be used for some good in the world. When a tragedy, serious event, or societal problem continues to persist, it becomes apparent that we all have to do our part in some shape or form. But we don't always know how we can do that, can we? Or that we can even help in the first place. Governments, companies, and NGOs do their best to spread awareness and create campaigns where we can help ourselves, but they're not marketing experts. So if we don't know about them, then can we even do anything to help? We can't do anything to help because we don't even know that we can help in the first place. So this is where the influencer plays a big part. Because unlike these big organizations, they actually focus on interacting with their followers daily and are mini masters of marketing, I'd argue. Companies know this, and often they ask an influencer to use and review a company's product, like makeup, for example. So others are more likely to know it exists and use it after. In this instance, though, replace makeup with advocacy, and suddenly all of these organizations that are trying to spread awareness for a societal issue and make change have a much greater reach and power to make a difference because other people know that they can help now, thanks to the influencer who played the middleman. The most recent example that I can think of from the top of my head is Mr. Beast and Mark Rober's Team C's campaign just last year, where donating $1 to the cause meant they removed 1 pound of trash from the ocean. At the end of the campaign, they garnered over $30 million worth of donations and picked up over 30 million pounds of trash from the ocean in a month. Influencers encourage action to be done among their followers on a large scale, and it can lead to good societal change if the action encouraged is for a good cause overall. Now, this wholesome concept of a following gets really bad when the influencers you trust start spouting lies, however. Because of the trust already built, you're more likely to trust them without looking any deeper, and this is where exploitation becomes easier to do, as sad as it is to say. So for examples, let's go back to misinformation and historical revisionism. These have been tools used by many throughout the world's history, and one of the worst ways this affects people is in how events may be revised or reported as happening more ideally than they actually had. Take, for example, Japanese depictions of its own conduct during the Second World War. Yasukuni Shrine remains a symbol of such controversy in how many convicted war criminals from World War II remain buried there with full honors, a few of whom are Class A war criminals who are directly tied to planning and directing events in the war, such as those atrocities committed in the Philippines. Another would be in the selling and misleading of people into buying shady products. The most universal example of this was the origin of the figure of speech snake oil salesman, in which snake oil was peddled as a supposed cure-all medicinal product in the early 19th century of America. The most recent universal example outside of the Philippines I can think of would be the misinformation surrounding COVID-19 with ivermectin, a medicine meant mainly for veterinary purposes, which was peddled as a treatment to the virus. But actually, for a more local example, now I can think of one. Do you guys remember when Duterte said petrol on your mask would help? Do you guys remember that statement? I'm gonna link that somewhere here. Like, he basically just said, just put gas on the mask. Like, that won't help. It really won't. It really, really won't. Like, I'm just so amazed that he just said, put petrol on your back to the video. A popular topic, and for some reason, a controversial one, among the masses Filipinos is whether or not Ferdinand Marcos martial law period was the golden age of the Philippines. While infrastructure did increase during this time, to be fair, it's heavily countered by the fact that the entire country was put into debt, which we're still suffering from today. Aside from debt, many people who spoke out against Marcos mysteriously disappeared for some reason. And there were many tragedies that happened during this time, yet the younger generation think that martial law was the golden age of the Philippines. Now, there's this video called Millennials for Martial Law that I highly recommend you go and check out. I'll leave the link in the description below, and I'll link it down here, because this video has actually been going on for a while, but they sum it up really well, and it's information that needs to be spread. Now, before I talk about people who have spread this information, I just want to put the disclaimer that PsyPoints isn't encouraging you guys to go cancel them, be mad at them, but rather be aware of the impacts of their past actions and why that phenomenon exists. Despite the hard evidence given against the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos himself, it's through social media that this information has been spread out over time. It isn't only through fake news, but it's also through people with influence, like Toni Gonzaga. Toni is one of the most well-known actresses and hostesses in the Philippines and has a huge following. In her interview with BBM, this is pre-election results, so before everyone was kind of sad and upset about it, rather than addressing the issues of Marcos in the past, she ignored all of that and only focused on making him appear good. Now, there's nothing wrong with humanizing a controversial figure, as Toni herself argues, and I actually fully agree with. However, the problem is that she ignored his controversies when an interview for something as important as the presidency, should address both the good and the bad, right? Because she only talks about the good of BBM, however, people who follow her will be influenced to only have a good impression of BBM without thinking more about his controversies and beliefs. Looking past his family name, the legacy his father left, and his own set of issues, those people still support BBM because Toni does. They trust Toni, and because Toni supports BBM, they also believe in BBM. Some other influencers who have spread this rhetoric consist of Richard Gomez, Don Zulueta, Paul Soriano, Andrew E., and of course our favorite singer, Toni Gonzaga. Even Marcos himself has taken on the influencer image by using his YouTube channel, that does exist, yes, you can search it up, to promote himself and his party for the 2022 elections. As celebrities who have a lot of influence over their audiences, their endorsement of BBM and possible spreading of misinformation can have a great impact on how people think. Now, what these all have in common, rather than addressing any of the controversial or problematic aspects of their president, they only were capable of framing the good aspects as a way of advertising their vote. Regardless of whether or not they're right or they're wrong, to avoid acknowledging any of the negatives in an argument counts as misinformation already. They're not able to address the picture as a whole, and instead are selective with the conversations they partake in. When it comes to the subject of, well, history at the very least, it's important to view events as a whole, both the positives and the negatives, without disregarding the side we find inconvenient to the conversation. After all, it's only in having as complete a picture as possible that we can make an informed conclusion and evaluation of either an individual or event in our history. As a certain fictional character aptly put it, one good act cannot wash out the bad, nor the bad the good. Don't write off times in the past as simply being perfect or being completely terrible. Try to look into and remember all of it, both the good and bad it brought. And from there, decide whether it was ultimately a good or bad thing for you, of course, but also the community, the country, or the world as a whole. Thank you guys for watching. Please comment any topic you'd like for us to tackle next, and please like and subscribe to the channel. I hope you all have a great day ahead, and always remember to be responsible with history and anything, any power you have, really. Always be careful with what you say. With that, thank you all. I hope you have a great day ahead.